Okay, this lecture is from Lesson 12 on how to draw cast shadows using perspective. Now you have this page in your book here on page 54, and that's what I'll be talking about. What I'll do is I'll probably do 2 examples of each one of these. Now this is just an aid for you when working on Project 4, which you are starting now in Lesson 12. It can be used and applied to a lot of things later on in drawing because most of the time the best light source is a single light source that has some direction to it. And so the idea about direction is that, as you can see in this example, the actual shadow is going off to the left on this object, going off to the right on this object. This is a one-point perspective shape. So in doing a one-point perspective shape, as we always talked about the baseline being straight, the baseline of the shadow will also be straight. Now the distance of the shadow from the object itself depends on your light source and how high it is off the horizon line. So in this instance, we're going to have a fixed light source that's right here. So basically, when you have a horizon line and you have vanishing points on that, your light source is generally higher, but you want to make it a point. And because what you're doing is drawing straight lines from that light source point to these objects. Now, when these objects are curved, or if they have cutouts in them, you can apply the same logic and the same rules that we're doing here. Sometimes it takes a little bit of invention, and a little bit of logic and practice. But the simple basics in drawing 1 is this, and that's what you can learn and apply to Project 4. Okay, now this is a 2-point. Now the only difference between 1-point and 2-point in the shadows is that the shadow also goes back to 2 vanishing points, where in this one, the front of the shadow is the horizontal line or base or parallel to the baseline of the object. Now the other thing about these 2 shapes is that you'll notice that I drew them in a transparent way. In other words, I drew these hard straight line for a linear drawing, and then I actually drew these dashed lines to show where the back corners and the back side of this box is, because you need to at least understand or approximate where it is when you're doing drawings with shadows. Because in 1-point perspective, you have an additional thing of a cast shadow line. Now what happens in 1-point is from the point of the light source, we'll go down to 2 corners. And it'll be one of the front corners, and in this case it's this one because it's left of the light source point. And then the back corner, and the reason it's the back corner and not the front one is because this, as you've seen in other illustrations about light, I said you'll have 2 planes in shadow. This one back here is lit, and so is this one from this light, but this front one and this side one are not. So the cast shadow is going to start at the corner, the back corner closest to the light of this shape. And this one will be the right corner closest to the light on this shape. So when I draw these, they end up at these 2 corners, and that's why I drew it transparently. When you get to this one, this is easier to illustrate, and you see how these 2 planes are in shadow. These 2 are not, because they're catching the light as well as the tops. Okay? This one comes from this corner, but this one also uses the closest corner. And then in this case, instead of using the back corner, it's going to use the bottom corner, because that defines the width of this shape, and this one goes to the vanishing point over here. So what you might be calling the receding lines back to 1-point really is, first we'll do these, then we'll do the horizontal line, then we'll do from this corner to the back corner, and that's a cast shadow line. On here we do this from here across this point where it hits the ground, same here to this closest corner where it hits the ground, and this one where it hits this corner, which is the closest corner of the shaded plane closest to the light. Okay, then when you get to this point A, then you have to go up to the vanishing points. And as you remember, 1 point perspective does not have to, has 1 point, 2 point, has 2 points. The box has to be in between the 2 points, and it does not have to use the same point as 1 point. It does not have to share, although it could have. Okay, so I'm going to move this out of the way, and we're just going to illustrate that really quickly. So I'm going to draw the horizon line up here. We'll put the light source here. Then the first thing we're going to do is draw the shape. So I'm going to do 1 point perspective right here. And this will be very similar to what's in the book. Now, as you see, I got to follow back to the point. I can make it as deep as I want to. I'm going to go about there. Now, as I said, I'm going to do 2, so I'll do another one here. Now, what you'll notice when I do this, as one moves closer to the light source, you're going to have different shadow. Remember, this is 1 point, so I still have to go to the same point. I'm making a little crooked here. Probably should use a ruler, but I think you'll get the idea. I was going to make this one as deep as the other one. I'll make them the same. By deep, I mean I went this far back with the line, which was actually right parallel or tangent to this other one. Okay, so those are the 2 1 points. So let's work on those first. This is a light source. So I guess I can use a ruler here, make it a little easier. So as I said, it comes down to this corner, like this. Now if you draw them lightly, you know, then you really can just, because they're going to crisscross a whole bunch of things here, so I'm just going to draw them real light. So you see the light will hit the corners, and that's where you need to start. And I'll draw the light on this other one right while I'm at it here. This one. And my back one way over here. Okay, so you notice how that light source radiates around objects? Because it's coming from 1 point, like a light bulb, and it radiates out. Okay, now to make this comparison clearer to you, I'm gonna make both of the baselines right about here, and I'll make them the same. Now, if the, you know, this is an artist's interpretation. Now, if you have if the light source is lower to the ground, closer to here, like sunset, then this angle will turn. You see, and actually you may want to make it longer. But you see, that's an interpretation that you have when you're doing this. This just gives you a really good baseline of the beginnings of an accurate way to draw this. Okay, so this one, baseline for this one, and this one's baseline for this one. Now you notice how you have a gap here. We need something over here now, and this is the cast shadow line, which means you just go from this corner right to there. The cast shadow line in the back is the same thing. This is the corner closest to the side with the light, and it has to go from that point to this point. So there's the shadow for this one. Now if we were to illustrate that, we can do that in a minute. I'm going to do the cast line for this one, which is right here. And the back corner I can't see on this one, so I'm going to have to, I can either guess or I can, you see, I got to do perspective here because this has to go to the front. So there's that back corner point right there. I can finish it off real quick for you. It goes like this. See, this is going back all the way to that point again. So this cast shadow line has to go right to there. So if we were to draw this then, or to shade it in so you can easily see this, this would be the box, and then the shadow would be here. Same thing, this one. Now this one, as you know, has two sides in shadow. You can have a primary side and secondary side, which is pretty much what you're going to have in your project 4, that you'll have to solve those problems as which one do you want to make darker, depending on, because they're both away from the light source. And then this is your shadow in here. So you see how this arrangement can work really well in terms of giving you a really good start about how to judge shadows when using perspective. You can also use your own imagination and help that out a little bit, maybe make a few changes and adjustments, but as you can see, this basic premise works quite well. So now let's talk about two-point perspective real quick. And again, in order to make the shapes not distorted, I'm going to use 2 points that are, remember, way out in my peripheral vision. Let's see, I'll start out with, let's put one, I'll put one right here. Put one in the middle. I'm trying not to get it too confusing is what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so now let's quickly make the shape. Hope we don't make it too, I'm going to make it a little smaller so I don't overlap that one too much. And now that I have a back corner, you know, this one goes to there, and this one goes here. Okay, so now on this one, we want to go to this corner, the closest corner. Looks like that's going to go straight down almost. And on this one, it's going to be the bottom corner of the closest corner side to the light. Okay? Okay, so now in this case, we've got to go to this is the closest corner line. This line right here. This has to go this way and that way. So again, depending on how you would generally have a taller shadow when the light source is lower. You see, because what you got right now is you could really start this anywhere along here that you want to. So just as this one, I could have been a little higher or a little lower. That's an artistic interpretation of how you want to do that. Now, but these points will fan out differently as this point moves up or down the horizon. These will go in and out. But the higher it goes, they'll go in, and the lower it goes, they'll fan out, because a shadow gets fatter when the sun is setting and it's lower. And that's all. But as far as where you start here, that's up to you. Okay, and you can make that as a kind of a, well, that's your judgment. Okay, so I'm just going to pick something that's similar to this in cast length. Okay, so I'm going to pick something, probably around in here. If I don't like it, I could change it. Okay, now what you have is you still have this small aspect here of the cast line, because what's happening is you see this area here is going, this is a straight line right here, and so here it's going to be an oblique line. And you really don't know what that is, but you do, because it's right here and right here. And that's also called, you know, a cast shadow line, but that doesn't come up as much in the 2-point perspective as it does in 1 point. And again, you have your two sides here. and then your shadow. Now, of course, you won't see a corner on a shadow. The shadow will never make a differentiation here. It'll always all be the same. But it can make some very interesting shapes that are fairly correct. Okay, let's do one more. Let's try one right here. We'll make a small one like that. I'm going to do this real quick and see if I can't just eyeball this one. Okay, there's a shape. I'll use a ruler to do this part. So closest corner needs to have that cast line on it. That's pretty important, right from the closest corner. Okay. Then you've got the back corner. And that's going to be it. Okay, so now from the closest corner, I'm going to pick a spot. And here's what's going to happen here. If I take it too high, when it goes over here, it's going to be too high. So there's a point where you have to pick that spot. In this particular instance, see how that goes down to there? So that point, this is where the ground is. You see how I extended that? So if that's where the ground is, that has got to start here. You can't go any higher, but then you won't have any shadow on this side. So I'm going to go a little lower. So you got to watch that in 2-point because you really aren't sure what's going to happen until you draw this. Well, that's a long one. I think it's right about there. Okay, so now what we got to do is we have to end this one. So what we're doing now is when they get this oblique, see, I'm going to go from this line now